Yeah, I hope that you hearing me. This is the future, all about cybersecurity. Talking about the hackers, I'm just trying to warn you. From the one and only legend, the cyber informer. Hey, thanks for joining the podcast. Time to get it hype. This I know you gonna like, giving you some insight. They try to hack in your database, homie, not today. Thinking they can escape with your data and without a trace. Oh yeah, this is the cyber informer. Hackers, you going down like, oh yeah. This is the cyber informer. Hackers, you going down, yeah.
It's time for Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast, the podcast. This is episode 4, Daily Backups. This episode is brought to you by Loyal IT Solutions. For all of your IT business needs, visit loyalit.com.au for more information on how we can help your business. And by the Gosford Erina Business Chamber. To have your business voice heard, become a member now. Visit us at gebc.com.au. And by the Australian Federal Government. Welcome to Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast, the podcast. I am Michael Tremblett, the Cyber Informer, and I have a great show for you today. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for their feedback on the last episode where I interviewed Gabby Bowles from the Central Coast Mariners Football Club. The feedback was an overwhelming eye-opener as people had not considered locking down their Facebook accounts. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to episode 3. In this episode, we'll talk about the topic of the month, which is daily backups. We'll talk about what the Essential 8 recommends for backing up your data. We'll talk about the threats to your data and why they aren't all from hackers. And I'll discuss an excellent backup strategy. We'll talk about a growing threat that all businesses have to worry about, and we'll cap it off with what happened in the real world this month, including the unveiling of something called Super Duper Secure Mode. And I'll tell you about an episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver that you really need to see. It's going to be a great show. But before we get started on this month's topic of backups, I thought I would discuss what makes a cybersecurity expert an expert. Did anyone watch that TV series from the 90s called The Pretender? The premise was the protagonist, Jared, was an imposter that could impersonate a member of any profession. Each episode, he would slip into a new role and conduct himself in a way that would fool those around him. The funny thing was, in the 4 seasons the show ran, no one ever thought to check the credentials of this unknown person. What I'm talking about isn't a TV show, this is real life. How do you know the people around you or in your managed services provider have the qualifications to help protect you? Anyone can claim to be an expert in cybersecurity, but sadly, if all they know is the basics like how to configure a firewall or antivirus, cybersecurity is a hobby, not a profession. I could call myself the Junior Executive Vice President of Cybersecurity. It sounds fancy, but it doesn't mean anything. There is no governing body of cybersecurity, nor the IT industry as a whole, unlike in the medical or law industries, for example, which are highly regulated. You are relying on someone who claims to be an expert to actually be an expert just because they purport to be. It's time to start checking credentials. Saying you're a cybersecurity expert and being a cybersecurity expert are two different things. Cybersecurity is a specialist industry. It's like going to the dentist to get orthodontic work done. Sure, the dentist may decide to give it his best shot when applying your braces, but it would be best effort only. Likely what the dentist will do is refer you to a specialist. The same parallels can be drawn here. An IT support person will give you best effort cybersecurity, but do they really know what it involves? I can tell you from experience, I thought I was an expert at cybersecurity because I listened to a weekly podcast and have done so since 2005. Shout out to Security Now on the This Week in Tech network. It wasn't until I sat down to really study hacking and cybersecurity that I realized there's so much more than simply reading a tech journal, listening to a podcast, or being able to configure a firewall or antivirus. You need to know what makes hackers tick. What is their mindset? What are they going to try in any given scenario? I've always been interested in making computers do things that they weren't programmed to do. What can I do to make this device, website, or network do what I want it to do, rather than what it was intended to do? It's this sort of mindset you want from your cybersecurity team. Always be on the lookout for vulnerabilities in systems. I'm not talking about vulnerabilities in Windows which can be patched by an update, but what else can be exploited? Is there a way I can manipulate your website to allow me to buy products for 1 cent as opposed to $100? Is there an issue with the way that your network is configured to allow me to have admin access without me ever knowing the admin password? Can I guess your password to access your private data? That adversarial mindset is key to securing your digital work and private lives. An informer is someone who is on the inside and snitches on the inmates. That's why I picked the name the Cyber Informer. I'm on the inside. I know how the hacker mind works. That's what I have been trained to do. I've hacked networks, websites, and servers, and as a result, I have the certification to prove that. Does the business that provides you with your cybersecurity have the same credentials and mindset? Before you trust someone who says they are a cybersecurity expert, check their qualifications to ensure the people you are entrusting your network and data to are qualified professionals. There are cowboys out there. Each of them proclaims to be an expert. Sadly, they are like the pretender. Jacks of all trades, master of none. Next time you have someone telling you that they are a cybersecurity expert, check to make sure they aren't a dentist performing an orthodontist job. With that being said, I'll segue into telling you all about September's security topic, daily backups. September is our daily backup month. Daily backups is another important aspect of the federal government's Essential 8. I think everyone by now knows what a backup is, but do you really understand why it's important to back up, what threats you may be facing, and what makes a secure backup solution? For that, we'll talk a little bit about backups. I'll quote the federal government's Essential 8 guidelines. Having data backup and restoration process and procedures is an important part of business continuity and disaster recovery planning. Such activities will also form an integral part of an overarching digital preservation policy. When performing backups, all important data, software, and configuration settings for software, network devices, and other ICT equipment should be captured on a daily basis. This will ensure that should a system fall victim to a ransomware attack, important data will not be lost and that business operations will have reduced downtime. It continues. To mitigate the likelihood of data becoming unavailable due to accidental or malicious deletion of backups, organizations should ensure that backups are protected from unauthorized modification, corruption, and deletion. This can be achieved by storing backups offline, ideally at multiple geographically dispersed locations, or online in a non-rewritable and non-erasable manner, such as through the use of write once, read many technologies. To prevent backups from being retained for an insufficient amount of time to allow for recovery of data, organizations are strongly encouraged to store backups for 3 months or greater. To ensure that backups can be restored when the need arises, and that any dependencies can be identified and managed, it is important that full restorations of backups has been tested at least once following the implementation of backup technologies and processes. Furthermore, full restoration of backups should be tested each time fundamental information technology changes occur, such as when deploying new backup technologies. In the intervening time, it is important that regular testing in the form of partial restoration of backups is undertaken. To conform to the Essential 8 Maturity Level 3, partial restorations of backups is tested on a quarterly or more frequent basis. End quote. There's a little bit to unpack here. First of all, do you know what threats there are to your data? Not all of them are from hacking. I think everyone has had the situation where you either have restored your data from a backup or have wished your data was backed up so you could recover it. Backing up your data from a cyber attack is one reason why you would want to back up your data, but there are plenty of other reasons too. The most common reason to back up your data is to protect against system failure. Hard drives can and do fail. When this happens, we need to rely on backups. There are technologies to recover data from failed hard drives, however, it depends on how damaged a hard drive is as to the chance of a successful recovery. We've had to send hard drives away for specialized data recovery because people have failed to back up their data. Recovery specialists will open up the hard drive in a dust-free environment and replace certain parts of the drive in order to make it work again. If the spinning hard drive platters are physically damaged, data recovery for that area of the hard drive may be impossible. Non-solid state hard drives have a spinning platter and an arm which has what's called a read head on the end of it. This moves back and forwards depending on where it needs to read and write data on the drive. The space between the read head and the platter is less than the width of a human hair, and if that read head makes contact with the platter, that part of the drive will be destroyed. Even dust on the platter is enough to destroy data on the drive. If you are going to decommission your computer to ensure no one can access your data, even deleted data can be recovered, but that's another story. It is recommended to drill a hole in the hard drive where you drill through the platter as well. If you're going to do this, be careful and be sure to wear eye protection, as some platters are made of glass and could explode internally when you drill them. Solid state drives, or SSDs, use completely different technology, more like your USB flash drives. Instead of a spinning platter, the technology works by pushing electrons through insulation into a cluster of memory banks or semiconductors. If you remember, we've talked about how data is represented as either zeros or ones. In this case, the presence of a charged semiconductor represents a 1, and the absence of a charge is a 0. The advantage of this is that they are extremely fast. However, unlike spinning platter drives, SSDs have a finite number of writes, which means they wear out. Methods of recovery, such as the dust-free environment I just mentioned, will not work for SSDs. Ultimately, if an SSD fails, there's not much you can do about recovering your data. In other words, if you use SSD technology, backups become even more important. The most common cyber attack is ransomware. If you are attacked and your data is locked, recovery from backups are the only way to get your data back without paying a ransom. Depending on the ransomware group, paying the ransom doesn't necessarily mean you'll get your data back either. I do a deep dive in how ransomware works in the Cybersecurity Academy, but I'll explain the TLDR version of what ransomware does. It uses unbreakable encryption to encrypt your data using a secret key. The secret key is held by the hackers. This key is so long and complex that to try and guess every single combination will take longer to guess than the remaining lifespan of our sun. Yep, our sun will burn out before you guess the key for your data. So the encryption is unbreakable. In order to get the hacker-controlled key, you must pay a ransom. This ransom will be paid in either Bitcoin or Monero coin. Don't worry if you don't know how to make this payment. Depending on the hacker gang, they will have a help desk which will help you pay the ransom. Once they have received payment, you'll get your key and decryption program so you can get your data back. Of course, this is mitigated by a solid backup solution. If you have a backup that wasn't encrypted during the attack as well, then you don't need to pay the ransom. I've said on the podcast before, if I woke up tomorrow and my photos were all gone and someone said I can give them back to you for $1,000, would I pay it? It would hurt, but you bet I would. However, I have mitigated this threat by having 5 copies of my photos in backups, removable hard drives, in the cloud, and on separate computers. I'm not chancing anything with these images because they cannot be replaced. Theft is also a possibility. If all of your data is at your business and a thief comes through and clears it out, you'll be stuck. I told a story about this on the Essential 8 Daily Backups informational video on cybersecurity.loyalit.com.au, but I'll talk about it here too. Back in the late 90s, I was providing support to dental and specialist medical practices. There was a dentist in Sydney who was backing up on floppy disks. He was taking the disks home with him every night. One weekend, when the practice was closed, the business was robbed. They took everything. The safe was broken open and all computer equipment was stolen, including all of the floppy disks he had on site. Because he had taken home the most recent backup on floppy disks on the Friday night, I was able to provide a replacement PC and restore his system to that. By late Monday morning, he was operational again on all of his critical systems. Without that backup off-site, he would have lost all of his patient data. Also consider people may just want to cause damage and not steal anything. Many years ago, the Loyal IT offices were broken into, vandalized, and non-critical computer equipment was stolen. Natural disasters can happen, such as fire and flood. Living in Australia, we've seen both of these scenarios. It's unlikely to affect you, but if it does, you stand to lose everything. On the Central Coast, we've been affected by floods multiple times in the last 15 years. We've been in the crosshairs of major fires during recent summers. Are you confident you have what it takes to recover your business should the worst happen? People can delete data by accident, and sometimes a malicious insider can delete your data intentionally. A malicious insider doesn't have to be a direct employee either, just someone who has access to the system. Would you believe we dealt with an incident where the wife of a business owner who was going through a divorce let herself into the building one night with the key, disabled the alarm, logged onto the computer, and went to town deleting data. She locked up and left the business to find what she had done the next day. Fortunately, little did she know, they had a robust backup solution, so they recovered quickly. That's highly illegal, and the police were involved after that. But these things can happen. Sometimes you may need to go back to a previous version of a document because you edited it and fouled it up. It happens. That's why we have backups. File corruption historically is another reason to restore data. Have you had your computer on and the power has gone out or the network connection has dropped? Then after that your document is unreadable? Not so common these days because software is designed to withstand this, but it does happen. If these things are inevitable, how do we mitigate against all of these scenarios? This is where the 3-2-1 backup rule can help save your business. What is the 3-2-1 backup rule? It simply means 3 copies of your data, your live data plus at least 2 copies. The more copies you have of your data, the better. At minimum, you should have 3 copies to minimize the risk of data loss. 2 different media. Ensure it is backed up on at least 2 different media types, such as USB hard drive and NAS device. This is less important these days, but still good practice. It is to mitigate against a certain type of backup device failing. A classic device with a high failure rate were tape drives. These days, many backup solutions use hard drive technology, so storing data on different media these days is not as important as it once used to be. One off-site. This is really important. Take at least one copy of your data off-site. This will mitigate against local disasters like fire, flood, theft, or malicious insiders. If you follow these rules, you will mitigate all of the threats I just mentioned. Let's talk about the off-site part for a moment. If you're taking your data off-site, you will want to make sure it's encrypted. This protects against unauthorized access of your data. If you lose the backup media drive or it's stolen, the person who ends up with it will not be able to access your data if it is encrypted. Over in the Cybersecurity Academy in the 321 Backup Rule video, I break down the numbers for successfully guessing an encryption key using 256-bit AES encryption, which is the standard encryption of my favorite backup software, Shadow Protect. It's another one of those the sun will burn out before your key is guessed scenarios. As important as running the backup is the amount of time that it's stored for. Retention simply means how long is the backup stored for before it is overwritten or deleted. The Essential 8 recommends data retention is set to at least 3 months. This means you should be able to restore your data at any given point of time in the last 3 months. A longer retention means your backup media will need to be large enough to store 3 months worth of data. There are a number of backup types that can be used to achieve this. The major categories of backup are full, incremental, and differential. Each have their own strengths and weaknesses. The de facto standard is incremental backups. This allows for shorter backups, more frequent backups, and longer data retention at the expense of restore speed. This is generally accepted as the best backup type for small business. I talk more about these backup types in the Cybersecurity Academy video, How to Plan and configure your backup using Shadow Protect. One of the more common misconceptions is your backup is set and forget. It's anything but that. Backups fail more frequently than you may think. They can fail for a range of reasons, from hardware failure, network connectivity issues, software product crash, backup media filling up, and any number of other random events that can cause backups to fail. Another important part of the puzzle is monitoring your backups. It is best practice to monitor your backups for successes and failures. If you neglect to monitor for successes, how do you know the backup has not crashed and is not running if you didn't receive a report or check the logs? One of the golden rules of management is, how can you manage it if you can't measure it? Backup reporting is a measurement to allow you to manage it. Backup checks are as important as having a backup in the first place. And finally, the last part of the process that is extremely important is the process to test restore periodically. You may be backing up using the 321 backup rule, using encryption and checking the logs, but how do you know what is being backed up is not corrupted or bad data? We must restore to be able to determine that. There was a business I knew that had been doing all of the right things, backing up, 321, the whole 9 yards, but when it came to the crunch and their server failed, the backup was restored, but the data was bad. The server had been backing up corrupted data because it was failing, and it had been backing up bad data for months. In this particular case, we were able to reconstruct the data over several hours, but it was a near miss for the business. Check your backups periodically. The Essential 8 recommends that you do a partial restore each quarter and a full restore when major changes occur to your IT infrastructure. Depending on your server configuration, a full restore may be out of reach for many small and medium businesses. Enterprise will have duplicates of their IT server infrastructure just for testing purposes. This is not feasible for many small and medium businesses. However, partial restoration is within reach. Do a frequent partial restore for your peace of mind. Whenever I take on a new client, the first 5 questions I ask are, what program do you use to back up? Who is checking your reports? Are you taking your backups off-site? Who is in charge of rotating the backup drives? How often do you check the recovery of your backups? If the answers are unknown or the answer is we don't, straight away there's work to do. Ask yourself these questions and tick them off. If you don't do all of these, you are leaving yourself exposed. Okay, we'll move away from talking about backups and talk more about hacking. The most insidious result from hacking is ransomware. I haven't talked about this on the podcast before, but there is such a thing as ransomware as a service. This is gaining popularity as network access gets harder and harder to achieve. Ransomware as a service enables anyone, even those without a technical background, to be the beneficiary of ransomware attacks. Ransomware as a service is a service that affiliates can purchase. They would perform the attack using rented ransomware, and the affiliate would get a cut of the spoils. Now, the affiliate role is split further into specialized roles called initial access brokers. These IABs sell valuable illegal access to enterprise networks to affiliates who then perform the attack. The cybersecurity company Kela, ke-la.com, published their year-long exploration findings into the dark web and the market that's forming around initial access brokers. The key points from the report are: Kela reviewed more than 1,000 listings offered for sale for a full year from July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2021. The average price for network access during this period was $5,400, while the median price was $1,000. The top affected countries included the US, France, UK, Australia, Canada, Italy, Brazil, Spain, Germany, and the UAE. IABs built a pricing model for initial access. The most valuable offers include domain admin privileges on a computer within a company with hundreds of millions in revenue, with remote desktop protocol and VPN-based access being the most common offer. IABs find new attack vectors and accommodate the changing software targets of ransomware gangs, including network management software and virtual servers. Successful IABs find regular customers, some of which are ransomware affiliates, and move most of their operations to private conversations. However, new actors continually enter the scene. Some IABs adopt ethics that were introduced by some ransomware gangs. Namely, there is a certain criticism against actors trading access to healthcare companies, although it is still an initiative of a few actors and not a typical attitude. We'll talk about this a little more later in the podcast. IABs are eager to monetize their access and are using all means to do so. Some IABs were seen stealing data from the affected company to gain profits even if the access is not bought. They talk mainly about enterprise access. However, in a recent interview with a ransomware gang member, they want to keep ransomware out of the headlines, so they are targeting small and medium businesses in order to achieve this. Most businesses we have assessed under the Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast Initiative do not perform police checks when screening new employees, nor do they have any sort of internal monitoring to detect if any strange behavior is occurring on the network, such as someone trying to guess the administrator password, or the creation of a new administrator account. Both of these could be signs of a malicious insider or that a hacker is already in the network. With some potentially juicy payouts for someone simply opening the door to the network, this is beginning to be a threat businesses need to mitigate or at least monitor for. Okay, let's change gears now and talk about what happened in the real world last month. Microsoft Edge gets super duper secure mode. Yes, they're calling it that at the moment. Actually, they realise this is a humorous name, and they do plan to find something more serious if it does take hold. Microsoft's experimental Edge browser, Super Duper Secure Mode, asks, would you be willing to sacrifice some web browser performance in return for potentially significantly greater security? Microsoft Edge is built on the same technology other web browsers are built on. Chromium, Google Chrome, Brave, Vivaldi, amongst others, all use this technology as their base for the browser. According to research of all Chrome/Chromium browser common vulnerabilities and exposures issued since 2019, 45% of the vulnerabilities appearing in the Chromium project's V8 JavaScript and WebAssembly engine were related to its just-in-time, or JIT, component. And over half of all of Chrome's bugs being found exploited in the wild are abusing JIT bugs. JIT makes a browser run faster. That's pretty much the summary of the technology. So Microsoft asked the question, what if we turned off JIT to see if it impacts on the speed of the browser? Microsoft said that most tests see no changes with JIT disabled. This is not available in the browser at the moment. If you subscribe to the beta, dev, or canary versions of Edge, you'll be able to turn this on. If the tests are successful, we may see Super Duper Secure Mode, probably under a different name, in the mainstream version of Edge in the not too distant future. Now for Windows Update news. This past month, Microsoft released fixes for 44 vulnerabilities, 7 of the vulnerabilities being rated critical, and 3 of those being 0 days. 0 days are vulnerabilities that are actively being exploited where a patch was not available to fix the exploit. In other words, the vulnerability was not known to the vendor and there is no update to defend against it. The other 37 are rated as important. 44 is fewer than previous months, however 13 of the updates fixed remote code execution vulnerabilities, which is of most value to hackers. Speaking of vulnerabilities that are not patchable, hackers are now actively exploiting PrintNightmare. to help them move through networks after gaining a foothold. If we go back to the initial access brokers, if someone were to let a hacker into the network using a non-admin account, the hackers could still move around the network using PrintNightmare and elevate their privileges using this vulnerability when they find a machine that warrants it, such as the company's main server or domain controller. Further to this, there is a new ransomware called Magnabar that uses PrintNightmare to infect victims. In an article from CrowdStrike, they publish details on an old ransomware product that has been updated to include using this vulnerability to propagate their ransomware. To quote respected cybersecurity researcher Bruce Schneier, attacks always get better, they never get worse. And this is possibly proof of that assessment. A ransomware that had possibly been killed off by updates now has a new coat of paint and has become a threat again. On a different subject, there has been an increase in smishing targeting Android phones. Smishing is like your classic email phishing, which everyone is familiar with, but it uses text messages or SMSs, hence the name smishing. I don't know about you, but my phone has been overrun with smishing attempts. When I look at my phone in the last week, I've received 14 messages saying I have a new voicemail or that I've missed a call and to tap the link. The link goes to what I would assume to be a compromised website, as all of the links go to different domains like imagemakers.pl, dev.quickbooze.com, and witchumart.com. These websites likely don't know they're compromised. They are simply being used by hackers to host a malicious code. If you have an Android phone and you have the ability to install apps from outside of the Play Store, this malware will install itself automatically. The malware is called Flubot, and it's a form of spyware that can be used to take over and gather information from devices such as banking details. It also has the capacity to message the contacts of infected devices. Telstra have weighed in on this and they're saying they're having trouble blocking these messages as all of the messages are being sent from legitimate devices that are infected, rather than a malware spoofing a phone number, which is known as caller ID spoofing, which is easier for Telstra to block. Be on the lookout for this, and the advice is not to follow the link on the SMS, just delete it. In some good news, the REvil ransomware group appears to be still offline. With any luck, they'll be gone forever. In other ransomware news, the hacking group known as DarkSide appears to have re-emerged as hacking group Black Matter. You may remember the news recently that the Colonial Pipeline in the USA was taken offline due to a ransomware attack by the ransomware gang DarkSide. DarkSide went into hiding after they stopped the supply of fuel to a good part of the east coast of America. This was one of the most covered ransomware attacks in recent history, as it impacted so many people. The mistake DarkSide made was attacking a company that would get so much press coverage. This attack and negative press not only led to DarkSide disappearing, but a code of ethics to be created which specifically says it is forbidden to attack certain sectors. There have been bans on attacking healthcare, government, education, and non-profit sectors so as not to cause damage to patients, students, citizens, and other categories of people. The ransomware gangs appear to be passing on the message that they will only hunt companies and aim for financial gain. They have also said they will try and keep out of the news headlines by targeting smaller businesses, so this seems to support these claims. Okay, let's bring this podcast home on a lighter note. Did you see the John Oliver story on Last Week Tonight? Thanks to Aaron from the Autopod Decepticast for bringing this to my attention. The story was some amazing reporting on the spread of ransomware. John really nailed the 22-minute report on ransomware and drives home what I've been saying for a long time. Anyone is a target. If you haven't seen it, it's Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, Season 8, Episode 21. Sadly, the YouTube video is region locked, but if you have Foxtel, you can stream it through the IQ box. Just search for John Oliver and go to Season 8, Episode 21. The story starts 10 minutes into the episode. This is a must-watch story for everyone who uses the internet. Here's a bit of a teaser for the episode.
The scale of the Colonial hack was truly remarkable. And then in July, the IT software company Kaseya got hit with an even bigger hack. And since its job was to push software to other companies, that meant that hundreds of Kaseya's clients and its clients' clients, like a grocery store chain, a public broadcaster, schools, and a national railway system, were also compromised. And if you're thinking, hold on, is it just me? Or did there not used to be a massive ransomware attack every 2 months? You're actually right. Over the past few years, it's gone from a trickle to an absolute flood. The estimated total ransoms paid quadrupled to $350 million last year. And that is definitely an undercount, because companies often don't publicly disclose ransomware attacks for fear of negative press or lawsuits. And it's not just companies involved here. Everyone is vulnerable to ransomware.
So there you go, they've picked up the story about the pipeline in the US as well as the Kaseya hack, which is exactly what we've been talking about in the last couple of episodes. Absolutely a must watch. Hopefully I don't get a takedown notice for playing that snippet. Before I go, let's talk about this month's challenge. Last month I issued you a challenge to set up multi-factor authentication on your accounts. Did you do it? This month I want to issue you a similar challenge. Is your data being backed up? If so, does it conform to the 3-2-1 backup rule? Have a think about what data is critical for you. Can you afford to lose those work contracts you're working on? What about losing your digital diary? What about the photos of your kids? Are all of these backed up using the 3-2-1 backup rule? If not, you have some work to do. Do it now before it's too late. Thanks for listening today. Head over to Facebook and follow our page at facebook.com/CSBCAPCC. Follow our other pages as well at CSBCAPCC on Twitter, which will keep you updated on everything cybersecurity, Business Connect and Protect Central Coast related. You can also follow my Twitter account, which is at cyber_informer. This is where I'll discuss many different cybersecurity topics of a general nature and not necessarily cybersecurity, Business Connect and Protect Central Coast focused. You can also visit the website at cybersecurity.loyalit.com.au, view the free videos and download the fact flyers. Come and subscribe to the Cybersecurity Academy, which will give you access to the private Facebook group where you'll be able to ask me questions and interact with other members. You'll have access to the premium videos and fact sheets, as well as receive an hour of cybersecurity related support each month, all for under $100 per month. That's great value. Next month is International Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Hacktober. We'll give the Essential 8 a rest and we'll talk a little bit more about hacking and the cybersecurity industry as a whole. If you liked my favorite vulnerability names, you're going to love my top 10 hacking tool names. Don't miss it. Thank you again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast using your favorite podcatcher and follow us on social media. Until next time, stay safe online.
Oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down like, oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down, yeah.